Hi everyone, it's Kyne. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we are doing a sewing tutorial on this little evening gown. I have another gown that's like this. It also has the little mermaid bottom on my channel, but that one I made out of tulle. This one, it's not as fluffy because I'm just using fabric to make the mermaid bottom, so it's not going to be as big and as dramatic as that one, but I make up for it with this little shiny holographic, sort of like shattered glass effect fabric. I got it off of an online retailer that I found called Coquetry Clothing. They sell fabrics, but they also sell clothes, which are like pre-made for you to buy. And I saw a dress that looked just like this, and I was like, I want to try to make that on my own. I didn't want to pay like the full price to have it pre-made. I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could make it because it didn't really look that hard. And it turned out pretty well. If you want to see more like full body pictures of it, check out my Instagram, onlinekyne, where I'll be posting some pictures of it. You're going to want to have about 4 yards of this fabric. Honestly, I could have just used 2 for this dress, and that's how much I had originally. But then I decided I wanted to add that little mermaid bottom, which took me another 2 yards. I'll show you what it looks like with and without it, like depending on how much fabric you want to use. It was actually a really easy garment to make. I think between the sleeves and the top and the mermaid bottom, if you've watched my other sewing tutorials, these are all things that I've done in other videos, and I'm just putting them all together in one. So if you want to see how I created this, then just keep on watching. Okay, so here's the fabric we're working with today. It's this beautiful gold and black shattered glass holographic effect, and it's 4-way stretch. Some stretch fabrics, they're only 2-way stretch. If that's the case for you, you can still do this. You should just lay it down so that the stretch is sideways so that it stretches to fit your curves. There's not much need for a vertical stretch here for this dress. Now we're going to start off by making the sleeves. I have a basic sleeve pattern that I traced from a sweater of mine, and I pinned it onto fabric that's been folded twice. So once to give me a left and a right sleeve, and again so that I can cut it on the fold and it'll be symmetric. So once you cut it out, you should have 2 symmetrical pieces. As you can see, I made the mistake of cutting too close to the edge that included some of the black trim that came with the fabric around the gold. Not that big of a deal though, I just made sure that I hid that part inside the seams when I stitched it together. So you'll see after I cut it out, I folded it in half again and stitched along that edge, making sure to cover up that bad part. And you should have 2 nice identical sleeves. I've seen some tutorials, you know, when they do a front half of the sleeve and a back half of the sleeve, but since our fabric is stretched, it doesn't really matter all that much. So I keep my sleeves symmetrical just for simplicity's sake. Now we're going to make the main body of the dress, which is just going to be a long front and back kind of tank top shape. I folded the fabric right sides together, about the approximate width of what I thought I needed, and then I started tracing my bodysuit pattern. But then I realized it would be wiser to just fold this in half again and cut it out on a fold, just like I did for the sleeve so it's symmetrical. You might notice I extended the shoulders a little bit wider than my pattern, just so that the sleeve seam would fall right on my shoulder, because the bodysuit pattern that I have is more for a slim tank top sleeve, whereas I want this sleeve to go right to the end of my shoulder. If you want to be sure for this, you can measure out like the distance from your neck to your shoulder, but I kind of just eyeballed it. Now instead of tracing the full bodysuit, I did extend it down so that it would be a dress, and you can kind of eyeball yourself an hourglass shape. To play it safe, I kind of just followed the width of my pattern all the way down in pretty much a straight line, which you can always do, and then I altered it later on in the video. The length of this, by the way, is up to you. You can make it floor length, knee length. I initially made this hit the floor, but later when I decided to add kind of a mermaid skirt, I cut off around the knees of this, so really I should have just stopped at the knees. But when you cut this out, you should get 2 symmetric pieces for the front and the back. As I've done in my previous videos, I'm going to alter the neckline. I tend to like a pretty low back so I can step into the dress without a zipper. But I will do zipper tutorials in the future because I realize I do this kind of a lot. And at the front of my dresses, I tend to like just a little bit below my collarbones, not low enough to really like show too much of my chest. I'm trying to be conservative, okay? When cutting your necklines, always try to cut on the fold so it's symmetric. If this is your first time, try to put it on and put a pin where you want your neckline to go, just so you know how low to cut it, because if you cut it too low, there's really no repairing that. Now you can pin your 2 pieces together and sew a zigzag stitch all the way along the shoulder seams and then from the armpits all the way down to the bottom. So this is what I have now, putting it on, and because I use my bodysuit pattern for the top half, it fits pretty nicely. I just need to alter it from my butt down. And then with my sleeves, you can kind of get an idea of how it can all come together. But before we attach the sleeves, you can see here in the mirror what the bottom looks like. Ignoring the fact that it's too long because that's easy to fix, I also want to make it less straight looking. I want to make it narrower at my waist and at my knees so that my butt looks a little bit bigger in comparison. Of course, you can't make it too narrow because you do have to be able to walk around in it, but that's why we use stretch fabric. So I'm going to take the dress in now a little bit at the waist and at the knees. The trick is I wear the dress inside out and I mark out where my waist and hips are so I know how I want my hourglass figure to look. That's what those little horizontal notches are. And the way that I take in my dresses is I start by sewing right on top of the previous stitches that I just did so that the transition is seamless. And where I want to taper it inwards with that hourglass figure, I just push the dress in towards the machine so that the needle veers off of following the old path and narrows inwards. And then I taper it out to get back onto the old path. If the entire thing is too big, you'll just be sewing a new line from the top to the bottom. And the thing is, you can repeat this iteratively, tailoring it little by little and then trying it on until you reach a point where if you go any skinnier, you won't fit comfortably. And when you're pleased with it, you can just cut off the excess so that it's not bugging you when you put it on. So now we're going to install the sleeves, and simply put, you want to insert the sleeve while it's right side out and the dress is inside out. Line up the top of the sleeve where the shoulder is with the shoulder of the dress, and line up the bottom with the armpit of the dress, and pin these together. Just remember when you're pinning that the gold needs to be facing the gold so that it's right sides together, and the armpit of your sleeve is facing the armpit of the dress. Now, sometimes you can run into problems when your sleeve is way too big or the hole in the dress is way too big. The first step is to try both of them on the way I just did and check if the dress's sleeve hole is too small and it's too pressed right up against your armpit. Maybe you can cut that a little bit bigger. If it's too big and you can make it smaller, you can do that. When you do a lot of eyeballing like I do, it's normal to get things that seem fine, but when you want to pin them together, they don't line up right, and then you have a bunch of fabric that's just bunched up because it was too big. With stretch fabric, if I'm sewing two things together and one is too short and doesn't line up, I can actually pull on it so that it meets the length of the longer one. Like I'll just stretch it as it goes under the needle, which I'd rather do that than just bunch up the other fabric to make that shorter. But I find that now that I'm tracing my patterns, things tend to go a little bit easier because my patterns are all cut out so that they line up with each other, so I get less problems now. Next, I'm going to hem the edges of the neckline, which I've shown you plenty of times. It's pretty simple. I just fold it inwards and then pin to keep it in place and then run a zigzag stitch all the way around. By the way, I get a few questions about my sewing machine. It's a Singer 4423 that I got on Amazon. I don't know much about machines to really give you advice on what to buy, but something I like about this is the detachable foot that allows me to sew sleeves and circular things that loop around the machine. Not sure, maybe this is something every machine has, and I just think it's like super revolutionary. But if not, it could be something to keep in mind because it is a really useful feature. I don't know what I'd do without it. So you saw earlier what the bottom of the dress looked like, and you could stop here if you're happy with it, and that would just be the most simplest kind of version of this dress. But one last thing I'm going to change is I did want to add a kind of circle skirt like mermaid tail. I got another 2 yards of fabric. I cut that in half, and I'm going to make 2 half disc shapes. The idea is to make a full donut shape with the smaller hole being for your legs to go through, and the outer radius is just the size of it. To make sure that it lines up with the dress, I measured the hole at the bottom of my dress, which, by the way, I cut off right around the knees. I got 20 inches, which I multiplied by 2 to get 40 inches, which is going to be the total length around the bottom rim of the dress. So I need my inner donut circle to be the circumference. So using the formula 2 pi r equals c, we got that our radius is 40 divided by 6-ish, which is a little over 6 inches. So I took my fabric, I folded it in half, and at the corner, I'm measuring a circle of radius 6, which just means that your measuring tape is going to be about 6 inches from the corner, and then you just pivot around. For the outer radius, if you're okay with just using up the rest of your fabric, which is what I did, I would just cut as large of a circle as you can. But if you have to measure it, take a measurement from your knee to the floor, add a few inches for heels, and then this is going to be the length from the inner circle to the outer circle. It doesn't really have to be super precise, to be honest. Just cut that in a circle shape on the outside and the inside, and you're gonna have a donut shape. To create the other half, just fold another piece of fabric the exact same way and trace what you just previously cut out. If you want to make a little bit of a train out of it like I'm doing, you're going to make one end taper out a little bit longer, as you can see here. Just make sure that the other end is going to match perfectly with the first half that you're tracing, because they do need to match up on at least one side so we can stitch them together. You're going to lay down your two half donuts on top of each other with the right sides facing each other, and then sew along the straight edge that connects them together. And you should get a full donut shape. If you traced both halves the same, then it should just be a perfect donut. If you tapered one longer like I did, you'll have a front and a back. So make sure you know which is which. As you can see, the seams are really clean and the skirt is just continuous because I made those side seams match. If you want, you can hem the bottom of the dress like we did to the neckline, but I'm not going to do that. And as you can see, putting it on the circle shape, when it's draped around either your hips or your knees, it creates a kind of ruffling when it falls, which is a really beautiful effect. If you remember before, the bottom of the dress was kind of just like a column, like it was rectangular, but this just gives a little bit more shape. It moves nicer when I walk. And you can use this exact method to make circle skirts, ball gowns, just by tweaking the size of that donut shape. When attaching the skirt to your dress, you want the front to line up with the front if your skirt has one, and then you're going to make sure that the side seams are also lined up, just so it's cleaner. Line them up right sides together. Try to picture like Marilyn Monroe with her dress blowing up over the vent. The skirt should be flipped up inside out just like that when the dress is just right side out. I sewed a zigzag stitch all along that 40-inch circumference and then tried it on to find that the skirt fell a little bit lower than I had wanted. I personally like it to flare out above the knee versus below. It makes for easier walking, I think, when I have some more knee room, and I think the silhouette just looks nicer when the skirt is above the knee. I should have planned it a little better and pinned exactly where I wanted it by lining it up in front of a mirror first, but I just cut it out and sewed it back on higher. And you can see the difference. It really isn't that major. I think it just looks a little bit better. But this is what the finished gown looks like. It was super easy and simple. The train is pretty subtle because I didn't have that much fabric to work with. I'm pretty tall too, but I love how it turned out. You know, with stretch fabric, we don't really have boning or structure in this, so it's important to have some body to fill this out and really make it look its best. That's why I'm just so lucky to be a woman with curves. This is the finished product, you guys. It turned out beautifully. I love it, especially the color. I still can't get over it. I think gold is like one of the colors that suits me the best, but then again, I look good in every color, so. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something cool today. Be sure to check out my Instagram and Twitter, where I'm always active when I'm not here posting on YouTube. As always, I'll leave all the links and details down in the description, so be sure to check that out and leave me a comment letting me know what you want to see me do next. But until my next video, I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!